Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. Well, today's video is around using up sort of scraps, but I'm going to be using some book paper scraps. I have a little pile that I kind of put to the side that are mainly text. They have text on them in some way. These are all pre-made ones, not ones that I have created. If you wanted to, there are some Tim Holtz, these background pages. You could use something like this, but this video, you could also use things that you have created yourself as well. And so it could be something that you've stamped, it could be something that it doesn't have to have text is what I'm saying. It could just be, any stamping design, any leftover piece that you have that you can add color to, and we're going to make these into some little focal points, some foliage in this case, for our cards. So I have these few pages here. These are mainly more towards scraps and things. Now this one here, I'm actually just going to do a portion of it because I don't need to do the whole page. It actually is a nice one. But this is just showing you, if you have these bits and pieces, then we can throw at it some color. Now this color can come in any form. For the ease of it, I have some Oxide sprays. I have just got in a couple of the Distress Spritz, the mica Spritz, I think. Now these are mainly where, I think if I get this right, the mica is the colored part, not the the liquid that it is suspended in is not the colored part. So it's almost a transparent spray with the sort of coloured mica to it, I would say, anyhow. So I have used some Distress Oxide sprays, which are, a little more opaque. Not quite opaque, but, a little more so than the spritzes and things. If you've got these watercolour crayons, then go ahead and use something like that. I mean, I just want to show you that you can add any sort of color. You could use, if you've got leftover ink and you can kind of smush it down onto some scrap pieces of paper. If you've got paint roll off that you are using, then you can use that. If you're doing gel prints and you wipe off your brayer, you roll off your brayer, then use those. You could do some stamping in the background to keep it interesting, but just anything. Now, in my opinion, I would stop somewhere around here. You can absolutely stop somewhere around here and that would be fine. On the very right hand page here, I'm going to keep going and I'm going to take this probably further than what I usually would, because I just want to show you that even when you have a piece of scrap or like a piece of something that you think this is mildly horrible, there's nothing I can do to save this. Well, let me show you that there is something you can do to save it. And sometimes it is just a little bit hard to sort of see through what we see presented in front of us. So let's keep going. I am going to dry these off. I have added all sorts. I've added browns, turquoises, yellows. On that right hand one, it's pinks and greens and blues and yellows and all the things. So I do want to seal these in only because of what I'm going to be using afterwards, which is a Sharpie. So I want to get these nice and sealed in. Mainly because the Distress products that I've used on here, and those are all reactivated with something wet, so I would ruin my Sharpie perhaps if I went over top of it. So I'm using the Distress Glaze. Now I must admit I don't use this that often, and it's probably not something I would repurchase at all, but I'm going to use it up if I have it. You could also just brush over some matte medium. You could brush over anything to give it sort of a layer in between the pens that you're going to use and what's underneath the page. If it is like something like acrylic paint and it is long dried, then of course you're not going to need to seal it. That is fine. It's permanent. It's not going anywhere. I do then go over with this is a dry piece of paper towel, and just give this a bit of a rub. Some of the text appears to be moving on some of these, but anyhow, let that dry completely. And we have 3 pieces here. 2 on the right just have some color and you can definitely see the text through it. The one on the left is a little further, as I said. I took it a little further than what I might usually. And then this is where your creative side. You can either draw these, to your heart's content, or there are a million stamps out there, stamp sets that are sort of that doodle style, or you can have some foliage, anything that you think you could you just have it in a little pile that it's ready to go to create some focal points on your cards. Now I'm going to make a card today and finish it so that you can see what I do with these exact scraps. But you can really just go through. It's as simple as taking a Sharpie and making some shapes. Now, nothing is perfection here, not one iota. This is just the most basic of basic leaf shapes. You could come back in and do some thicker lines. You could come in and do some doodling. You could come in and add more color over top if you wanted to. You could stamp in some white paint just to get some nice contrast, or to pull back these dark colors a little bit. So many different options, but I'm trying to keep this relatively simple, and all I'm doing is fussy cutting these out, and you can see already that that very basic foliage shape that I created is actually quite cool. So those colors that I probably took further than what I might otherwise if I weren't creating this video for you, it turned into something really cool. And of course, you're going to put it on something, perhaps a lighter background that wasn't super busy, just because the actual colors are very bold in itself. But all I do is I just go through, I create lots of these at once, let them dry overnight or give them an hour or so depending on your climate, and then you can just go through and draw these shapes to your heart's content. You can draw circles, scribbles, hearts, trees, diamonds, stars, or you can stamp them all out. Stamp them to whatever you wish. Now, let's make this into a card, because we've got all of these completed, and I'm going to use the Simon Says stamp. This is the double plaid, I think it's called, basically a cover die. Now, I like this one because it's sort of a generic background, if you know what I mean. It doesn't go with any particular holiday season. It doesn't go with anything in particular, so I can use it for everything, essentially. And so I have die cut out 2 of these. I'm going to stack them up because this is going to be the background texture and interest that I'm going to use for this card. The little book text pieces that I have created, the foliage is quite bold and colourful in itself, and so I don't really feel like I need a whole lot more color on this page. I'm going to keep this card very simple and gorgeous, so a little bit of background texture like this is a good investment. You could just do this with in so many different ways. I mean, I have a million videos on my YouTube channel around ways that you can create background texture. You could just cut out a whole lot of individual dies, stack them up in 2s or 3s, and then glue them onto your background. Do it all in white, so it's a white on white background. You don't have to have an entire background cover plate to be able to create a background look like this. You could just do regular strips across the page. Again, I have videos all over my channel showing you all of the different options. Even if you don't use dies, you can just cut strips with a trimmer and layer those up and pop them across as well. Lots of different ways. I'm going to use some burlap ribbon here, just a little piece of it, and this is going to be like an anchoring piece for my little foliage pieces I have created. Then I have these Gina K designs. This has been buried in my stash for a little bit, so I must remember to come back to these and use them. And these are just lots of little sentiments that are printed out, ready to go. 1 sheet on black, 1 sheet on white. I'm going to use the white ones today, and a nice, easy, simple happy birthday. So this big one here, this would be a focal point all in itself. It's absolutely gorgeous, or you can use the little ones and join them all up in a nice little cluster like that, and I quite like the look of that, so I'm going to go with the smaller ones today. So 3 of these I have created, and as I said, I usually do this technique when I build up some extra scraps, or I've put some pieces to the side and I start getting a pile beside me. If anyone else can relate to piles on their craft space, I have a little craft space, but nonetheless I still seem to get a pile every now and then of things that I should use, or I can't bear to throw away, or that I'm sure there's another use for. And so it's things like this that you can, create with. Now, this is a Spectrum white marker, and I use this sometimes for adding in extra details. If you would like to go ahead and add in dots, highlighting parts, I will show you on that nice big leaf some options. You can do a little bit, you can do a lot. As I said, I'll show you the big leaf in a second, how I use the white marker on there. I'm taking some iridescent spray and doing what I call controlled splatter by just taking out the little nozzle and putting some drops all over the page. I'll put my sentiment right there in the middle of the burlap, and then I'm also going to add in a few little white enamel dots. Again, just a little bit of background sort of bling to go in the background, but a really, really simple card, and I absolutely love using up these extra pieces. And as I said, don't ever think you've taken something too far or you've gone too much or it's just not usable, because have a look at this, even with white dots, and then I can go in and add more. I can just stop with the white dots, either. These pens really do change the look of it. So that's one option if you think it's a bit bold or a little bit dark in the background. But anyhow, I hope you have enjoyed this today. I hope you get out your scraps and start spraying or swiping or painting or whatever makes you happy in your craft space, and create some little bits and pieces for future cards. Thank you so much. Supplies will be listed down below, and I will see you in the next video.